Today, I formally apologize as President of the United States of America for what we did. I formally apologize. And it's long overdue at a tribal school in Arizona, a community full of tradition and culture, and joined by survivors and descendants to do just that. Apologize, rewrite the history book correctly. I have a solemn responsibility to be the first president to formally apologize to the Native peoples, Native Americans, Native Hawaiians, Native Alaskans, and federal Indian boarding schools. It's long, long, long overdue. Quite frankly, there's no excuse that this apology took 50 years to make. The federal Indian boarding school policy, the pain it has caused, will always be a significant mark of shame, a blot on American history. For too long, this all happened with virtually no public attention, not written about in our history books, not taught in our schools. Let her talk. Let her talk. Oh, no, let her go. There's a lot of innocent people being killed. There's a lot of innocent people being killed, and it has to stop. For those who went through this period, it was too painful to speak of. For our nation, it was too shameful to acknowledge. But just because history is silent doesn't mean it didn't take place. It did take place. While darkness can hide much, it erases nothing. It erases nothing. Some injustices are heinous, horrific, and grievous. They can't be buried, no matter how hard people try. As I've said throughout my presidency, we must know the good, the bad, the truth of who we are as a nation. That's what great nations do. We're a great nation. We're the greatest of nations. We do not erase history. We make history. We learn from history. And we remember so we can heal as a nation. It takes remembering. This formal apology is a culmination of decades of work by so many courageous people, many of whom are here today. Survivors and descendants, allies and advocates, like the nation's Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. And all of you are part of that. Stand up. Stand up. As my grandfather would say, you're doing God's work. Another courageous leader who spent decades shining a light on this dark chapter. And leaders like Secretary Howland, whose grandparents were children at one of those boarding schools. U.S. Interior Department, the same department that long ago oversaw federal Indian boarding schools. Guess what? The extensive work on the breaking ground has happened with her. It's appropriate that she is bringing an end to what that very agency did. Groundbreaking report. Documenting what happened. We owe it to all of you across Indian country the truth. Truth must be told. The truth must be heard all across America. But this official policy is only one step toward and forward from the shadows of failed policies of the past. That's why I've committed to working with indigenous communities across the country to write a new and better chapter in our history, to honor the solemn promise the United States made to tribal nations to fulfill our federal trust and treaty obligations. It's long, long, long overdue. And I say this with all sincerity. From day one, my administration, Jill and I, Kamala, Secretary Howland, our entire administration have worked to include indigenous voices in all we do. Along with Secretary Holland, I've appointed Native Americans to lead across the federal government. I signed a groundbreaking executive order to give tribes more autonomy to make your own decisions, requiring federal agencies to streamline grant appropriations and applications, to co-manage federal programs, to eliminate heavy-handed reporting requirements. It's about representing your autonomy, and I might add, it's a hell of a lot more efficient when you do it too. Folks, I'm proud to have reestablished the White House Council on Native American Affairs, relaunched the White House Tribal Nation Summit, and taken historic steps to improve tribal consultation. With the historic laws I've signed, we're making some of the most significant investments in Native communities ever in American history. It's part of my Invest in America agenda, and it's helping all Americans from every state and every tribe, and that's good for all America. Helping Native communities get through the pandemic with vaccine shots in arms and checks in pockets. I'm proud this helped cut child poverty in Native communities by more than 1/3. I'm proud our economic plan has created 200,000 jobs for Native Americans. Record low employment in Native communities. With the strong support from Secretary Holland and all of you, we're finally modernizing tribal infrastructure, for God's sake. Building new roads, new bridges, delivering clean water, affordable high-speed broadband in every Native community, and so much more. Folks, we're just getting started. We're making historic climate investments in clean energy, conservation, clean water, Native communities, including co-stewardship of our land and waters. We just designated the first National Marine Sanctuary proposed by indigenous communities, which is off the coast of California. We just got that done. And I've restored and designated multiple national monuments to honor tribal nations, including the ancestral footprint of the Grand Canyon right here in Arizona, where I had the honor of visiting. It's breathtaking. It was breathtaking. I secured the first ever advanced funding for Indian health services, so tribal hospitals can plan ahead, order supplies, hire doctors, and know that the money will be there. We're also preserving ancestral tribal homelands, restoring salmon and other native fish, recognizing the value of indigenous knowledge and languages, especially those damaged in the boarding school era. In fact, my administration was proud to defend the Indian Child Welfare Act. An act that was passed in 1970 in no small part to remedy the harms of 150 years of taking Native children away from their families. But, as you all know, that act was challenged just a few years ago in the summer of 2023. Those who opposed us challenged on the ground that Native families should not have priority over everyone else in adopting Native children. Well, I took that all the way to the Supreme Court, and we won. We won. We also extended mental health programs through the Bureau of Indian Education so young people have the tools to end the cycle of generational trauma. As an educator, this is something Jill cares deeply about, my wife, just as she traveled across Native communities to increase access to health care and so much more, including helping open the first cancer cure center in Navajo Nation. More to do, a lot more to do. By the way, the infrastructure bill is over $1 trillion. It's not a decade. I mean, it's not a quarter. It's going to be there for a decade. Much, much more to come, and you've got to get your fair share. By authorizing the Violence Against Women Act, an act that I took great pains in writing 30 years ago, we also reaffirmed tribal sovereignty, expanded tribal jurisdiction in cases where outside predators harm members of your nation. And as we mark Native American History Month in November, this November, We recognize the contributions of indigenous people to American history. You are the first Americans. I might add, you're among the most patriotic Americans. Oh, that's a fact. The whole America should know, all America should know, indigenous people volunteer to serve in the United States military 5 times more than any other single group. 5 times. 5. Many having paid the ultimate sacrifice in every war since our founding. To all of you, thank you. Thank you for serving in so many ways as first responders, artists, entrepreneurs, educators, doctors, scientists, and so much more. Sharing your culture and your knowledge for the good of future generations. Believing in possibilities. Possibility to usher in a new era to a nation-to-nation relationship grounded in dignity and respect. It matters. My dad used to have an expression, Joey, everyone's entitled to be treated with dignity. Everyone's entitled. He meant it. Well, let me close with this. It's about restoring your dignity. I know no apology can or will make up for what was lost during the darkness of the federal boarding school policy. But today, we're finally moving forward into the light. As President of the United States, I've had the honor to bestow our nation's most prestigious medals to distinguished people and organizations all across America. That includes Native Americans who survived the boarding school era. Early in my term, I bestowed the Medal of Freedom, our highest civilian honor, on a man, my grandfather, who was an Irish immigrant and was not treated very well because he was an Irish Catholic in the coal mine era in Scranton. But he went on to be an All-American football player at Santa Clara. And every time they talked about All-Americans, he'd say, Joey, the greatest athlete in American history is Jim Thorpe. Oh, I'm serious. I knew a lot about Jim Thorpe before some of you probably even knew. As a child, Jim was taken from his home, but went on to become one of the greatest athletes ever in all American history. And earlier this week, I bestowed 2 other revered medals, the National Medal of Arts, the National Medal of Humanities, to 39 extraordinary Americans and organizations, including Rosetta Roll, an Alaska native. More than 80 years ago, she was a 6-year-old when she was taken to a federal boarding school. She spent 3 years without her family not known if she'd ever come home. 9 years old, she was one of those who did come home. Over the next 7 decades, she became a leading anthropologist and advocate, building a new era of understanding. Her story, from being taken from her home as a child to standing in the Oval Office, receiving one of the nation's most consequential medals, is a story of the truth, the power of healing. When Rosetta sees young people singing traditional songs, just like we heard today, she says, and I quote, "We will hear the voices of our ancestors, and we are now hearing it through our children." For too long, this nation sought to silence the voices of generations of Native children. But now, your voices are being heard. That's the America that we should be. That's the America we can all be proud of. That's who we are. For God's sake, let's make sure we reach out and embrace. Because you make us stronger, you are America. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. 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 Thank you, Joe.